Yo, what's up YouTube? It's Dobly again. Today is November 4th, 2025, and I'm gonna talk to you something about the differences between the Muslim immigration and the Chinese immigration overseas, because these two groups are two of the largest immigration group nowadays. And of course, we have a lot more Muslims than Chinese, right? So just be aware, I'm not trying to bring any kind of hatred against each other. I'm not trying to instigate any kind of violence or any verbal violence or abusive language against anybody. Everybody's equal, right? Everything I said from this channel is pretty subjective, okay? And I feel like, why we have so many controversies against the Muslims immigration nowadays is because Muslims do not behave typically. They do not try to conform the local norms there, right? So, for example, we have a lot of Muslims in New York as well. We're talking about Zahn Madani, right? Who might, become the new mayor of New York, right? That's more of an evolutionary, more of the pioneering, like a new branch of Muslims who can embrace their local culture, embrace, different culture like Christianity, and not to say that he will convert himself to a Christian, but to say to respect, different kind of religion, or even for the non-religious people, he just respect everybody. However, for more of a traditional Muslims, especially for some special situation like the extremist Islamic people, right? They have a certain kind of hatred towards the Christian world, or from other free society, because they think like, okay, a woman walking the street, you have to wear something like a gown. I don't know how to call that. I don't have a terminology in my mind. That thing doesn't really come up. Because I don't really care about the religion most part of my life. Well, I do respect religious people. Don't get me wrong, right? I have the utmost respect for whatever the religion you have, as long as you're not harming other people, right? Not for the extremists, though. But anyway, they feel like, some Muslims, traditional women, wearing some gowns or something like that, black gowns to cover their head, just to show up their face. Some more of a strict clans of them that will just even cover their mouth. They have a, like the mask like that. So they just reveal their part of their ridge bones of their nose and reveal their, just like a part of the, like, how to say, like, elbow bones, and part of the eye socket and eyes. Just that. So when they come across some liberated women, for example, in Iran, now they have some liberated women because the moral police are receding. They are trying to criticize, to say, why you're not wearing proper garment, right? You should cover your face, you should cover this, you should cover that. If other guys see you like this, they think you're a whore, they think you're a bad, then maybe they will kill you, they will stone you to death, something like that. That's pretty horrible, And we came across some very violent extremist Muslim. I'm talking about not every Muslims, right? Me personally, I come across a lot of very friendly and opening and welcoming Muslims, right? They invite me to have their food. They tell me something about their culture, but if they say I'm a non-believer, they do not force me to believe, because they are really good. They are really welcoming. This is kind of Muslims we need more in the society, right? However, for the extremists, right, they just center around their own Islamic ideas. If you are a non-believer of Islamic beliefs, right, they think you are the traitor. They think you are the person that need to be persecuted. They think that it's righteous for them in some special situation even eradicate your life. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to instigate that kind of violence. I never support this kind of violence. But the reason why I'm pointing out is because you guys have to be really aware of their root cause, how to think about the society, especially when they move to the Western countries, right? Well, it's another thing that for the Chinese immigrant, right? Chinese immigrant is also one of the very controversial topics here. I'm not talking about today. I will not talking about the business immigration. I'm not talking about study H1B, we're kind of experts, or some kind of more of an intellectual way of immigration. I'm talking about asylum seeking, which is kind of a majority I don't know whether that's truly the majority, but we have a feeling that because the social media always exposing that, we have a lot of argue, we have a lot of verbal fight over that, right? Even the border czar Tom Homan, right? He's a tough guy, designated by Donald Trump to deal with the kind of thing. We have the ICE problem, the ICE, right? The Mexicans, the Latinos there, living in the U.S., living in New York illegally, right? So that's a very hot topic now. So for the Chinese asylum seeker, right? Most of us were just came across the border. We walked across the border, the Mexico and United States border. That's the very border that Donald Trump really hate. I believe many American people actually hate the border, but many Americans actually welcome that. So the thing is that once we came across the border, many Chinese, this kind of border crossing people, we will begin to apply for asylum protection, right? So many people, I'm not pointing out fingers to say who is a true applicant who lied. You can never eradicate a possibility that someone would ever lie. I mean, I didn't lie, but you cannot totally eradicate a possibility, right? So out of 1,000 applicants, there might be some dishonest ones, right? They might cook the book. They might try to exaggerate the fact. So the thing is that most of the Chinese asylum seekers, they are just using the religious asylum seeking. And so they are afraid of ever returning to China. But we have some controversies to say that are they really immersing themselves in American society? Because it's pretty much similar to Muslims immigration. They still love their own culture, like I do, because I love the Chinese culture. Doesn't mean really I like CCP Chinese. No, I hate CCP, but for the Chinese culture itself, I kind of like it. It's not perfect, right? But the thing is that many Chinese people, they are not capable of English conversation, nor they had ever planned to do so, or maybe they had planned to do so, but English is just too difficult for them because Chinese language is very, very drastically different from the English language. So the thing is that many Chinese people have been living in the United States for about 50 years, but still cannot speak very smooth English. Many people cannot have English conversational abilities at all, at all. So, but the Chinese immigrant more like kept out to ourselves, pretty much like Muslims, but Chinese immigration is more like even less open compared to many Muslim immigration, because Muslims, they pretty much look more like a Western people, because in terms of genes, right? Not every Eastern Asian people look like Eastern Asian, so to speak. Not that typical slanted eyes, this and that. But, some people look more like international. Some people who look more like Homo sapien, right? But we do have some Chinese people who look very, very different. Like they're more like a Siberian face, more like a typical, so-called typical, stereotypical Eastern Asian face. So maybe because of that, because of their own culture is very different from the Western culture, so they are more reluctant to really immerse themselves to the Western culture and atmosphere, right? Maybe they are reluctant to learn English. They're reluctant to make local friends, even in terms of finding a wife or finding a husband. Many people tend to cling to their own clan. They will find somebody who look like them. So that's a different culture thing. So Chinese people usually work extremely diligently, extremely hard, because especially for some asylum seeker, I'm actually have to say for most asylum seekers, they do not know English. They cannot find any high-level job. I'm not trying to distinguish, between a high-level job or low-level job. I'm not trying to discriminate against blue-collar, right? Because blue-collar is respectable. You use your own hand. You deal with grease and dirt, nobody else, willing to deal with, and you make more money than the average white-collar colleague. White-collar counterparts, and that's reasonable, right? But the thing is that most of the Chinese new immigrants, like asylum seekers, they work as a blue-collar job. They work as a massage parlor. Some people work illegally. They work at a Chinese restaurant. They work at a Mexican restaurant. Some people also hired by the white people and local people here. But many people are not willing to share their story. They are not willing to make a lot of new friends. They are not willing to learn English very hard. They try to learn English, but they give up. So at the end of the day, they still return to the Chinese community. So that's why we have so many Chinatowns. And Chinatown is the one you can easily differentiate. I mean, you can distinguish Chinatown from any other area in any part of the world, because Chinatown does look different. The kind of color, the red color, red, golden stuff like that. However, the Chinese people are less aggressive in general to propagate or to spread out the Chinese culture to the non-Chinese people. You know what I mean? Chinese people tend to cling to our own small circle. But the Muslim people, they tend to be more aggressive. Don't get me wrong, right? Muslims, do not be offended by me, right? What I mean aggressive, literally, it means that you are more open to spread out your own culture to other communities. Plus, like I said, you look pretty much more like a Western people. But of course, if you're a Western people yourself, you know the difference, right? You do look different. But in the Eastern Asian people's eyes, for many people who are unexperienced, they distinguish between different races, different ethnics in Western society. They do not know the difference. Okay, so basically, just like, Western people, you have a hard time in distinguish between Asians. But if you look very closely, of course, everybody's different. We have a so-called Asian popular look, right? But that is not with everybody. People do look different. People do have a huge difference in terms of personality, looks, capability, including language skills, right? Anyway, so Muslims are more like, just like the, just like preaching, for the Christianity term, right? Muslims like preaching to other people, to tell them about how great Allah is. If you disagree with us Muslims, not everybody, right? Most Muslims will behave in a very respectful way, right? Respectful way, but some Muslims might get offended. They might just jump around, they become angry, and their face blushed, and they're trying to fight you. They're trying to argue with you in a very violent way. You know what I mean? So that's one of the root reasons why most of the immigration problems that are noticeable, right? I'm not talking about the unnoticeable one, because Chinese immigration does cause a lot of problems. Not everyone though, but we have once in a while bad people among any crowd, right? We have the Chinese fraudulent people. We have the Chinese people who are the Chinese gangsters. You're organizing this kind of organized prostitution or horror house, right? They're murdering people, they're kidnapping people, not just for the insider, but also they're murdering some people outside their circle. Sometimes they kidnap the local people. It's pretty bad. But Muslims on the surface are more aggressive, so it's more noticeable to see the differences between the Muslim immigration and the local people. Now, we have a lot of this kind of problem in the world, right? In Europe, we have Germany, we have Spain, by the Algerians, right? Coming across the Mediterranean Sea, right? We have a lot of countries. We have Netherlands, even, with a lot of Muslims. We have UK, the country was to be set up, was to be fallen under Muslims' arms, right? That's a big debate here, because we can see there are physical fights. There are just like fight between the Muslim people and the transgender people and even the local white guys there. And I remember there's a clip that a Muslim guy, a bunch of Muslim guys, it's like, I don't know, like 50 or 60 of them, or maybe 100 of them walking the street. They have their machete in their hands. They have the stones. Have you noticed that, the stoning to death? That's one of their penalties, penalties there, right? And they have a lot of, very violent tools, right? Some knife, some dagger in the street. They say, dare to see any local people protest against them. Because if they protest against them in a violent way, this Muslim guy fight back in gang. And it's doomed, I mean, even if you're Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, or Mike Tyson, can you fight, or Jet Li, whoever you are, or Naoya Inoue, Deontay Wilder, or Jilei Zhang, or Wei Li Zhang, whatever you are, can you fight 50 people with weapon in their hands at the same time? No, you're not Superman. Stop believing the crap for the animation stuff. You probably, without a weapon, you probably as a boxer, you can fight maybe 20 guys. No joking. Just bare knuckle fist, right? About the same weight. I'm not talking about you as a super lightweight. These are the super heavyweight. I'm talking about the same weight range, or maybe just 20% of the weight difference. You can fight 20 guys without any dagger, without any pistol, no problem. But 50 people with machete, with stone, with bricks in their hand, even you're a Superman, I doubt your ability, okay? And then, so nope, everybody shut up. They say, oh, these Muslims are so horrifying. And now some people, of course, they fight back. Local white people, they organize together to fight back this immigration from Muslims, right? From Muslim country, and they have a lot of conflict. They have a debate over the Christianity versus Muslim, especially not versus the normal Muslim, right? Versus the extremist Muslim, and they gotta have a debate. And that debate might escalate into from a verbal fight to the physical fight, from a physical fight to killing each other. That's pretty bad. We don't want to see that happening. On the other hand, the Chinese immigration, we do have our own problem. That is, Chinese people are silently not trying to fully immerse themselves into the Christianity, into the American local culture. However, the great about America is that America never require you or force you to convert your own culture into so-called mainstream white culture, because the problem, that's the diamond, that's the climax of freedom, is to really respect everybody as who you are, and then just like, the Koreans can speak Korean, Spanish people can speak Spanish, Russian people can speak Russian, no problem. You have their own community. You do not have to really merge with Anglo-Saxons for the genes or also for the language. You don't have to marry Anglo-Saxons. You don't have to force yourself to learn English. Of course, you have to learn English for the future generation. If your child wants to boom in this country, right, your child must be bilingual, even trilingual. However, they're not forcing you legally. They're not saying, oh, if you never learn English, you can never make money, you can never survive. No, you can see a lot of Chinese people all their life they live in Chinatown and they prosper. I'm not talking about Jensen Huang, who is a CEO, the head of NVIDIA, because that guy was special. I'm not talking about Elon Musk. We're just talking about ordinary people. Ordinary people can live without English. So that's how great America is. But even though, I have to persuade my friends to learn English more, because you're living in America, English is official language. You love Chinese, that's fine. But at least try to learn English so you can be bilingual. That's cool, right? Anyway, Chinese people are more peaceful. I'm not saying we do not have killers, murderers, rapists. No. But in general, right, the Chinese culture force you to really reflect more and try to homogenize, right? Using that word, like yin and yang, always in the perfect rotation. Everything's in a balance, just like kung fu pandas, like a Shifu, Master Shifu. Like you have this kind of yin and yang balance, harmony, energy, like that. So even if you put yourself in a conflict, you know how to pacify the situation without trying to kill anybody or be killed. You know what I mean? So you avoid a conflict as much as possible, because that's also the art of war. Sun Tzu, the art of the war is not to win the war, because if you win the war, you still gotta lose yourself. I mean, can you imagine that you win a war in a battlefield, you killed 100 soldiers without any wound? You will also hurt yourself at a certain cost. So the biggest art is to minimize the risk, not hurt yourself. So the art of war is not to really win the war, but to not lose. Of course, not lose, including not lose and win. Just like playing a Street Fighters, right? You win, perfect, or draw game. At least you should have a draw game. You can never lose. If you lose, you lose. Okay, anyway. So the problem with I don't think it's a problem. I think that's the attribute or characteristics of the Asian culture, Eastern Asian culture, especially Chinese culture for the typical one, right? Is not to stir up the air, not to instigate violence against ourselves or against other people. To maintain a balance If you have a conflict, you can solve the conflict in a more of a friendly way or more of a tactic way. You don't have to be always friendly, but you can be more tactful, like Sun Tzu, right? So that's why we also came across a lot of Chinese criminals, right? You can see the Chinese massage parlor. They're kidnapping people. They're kidnapping the girls for doing a lot of some kind of illegal prostitution stuff, right? I feel bad for these girls, but some of these girls are willing. They're willing to do that. No offense, right? But some girls are willing to do that because of the money. The payment is pretty high, right? We have a lot of scammers, right? Just like Verizon or some kind of gift card in Walmart, right? They just did something about an original gift card and used their, just like zero value replacement. So they actually steal the money from the original gift card. That's pretty bad. But, we do not have a massive campaign against this bunch of Chinese immigrants. No offense, right? I'm not trying to say Chinese people are more good at dealing with interpersonal relationship ever than the Muslims, because Muslims have their own way of doing things. I'm just talking about why is that? So in the world nowadays, many people pay attention to the Muslims immigration stuff and the conflict between the Muslims and local American people, local UK people, local French people. Poland is an exception, right? Because Poland had a very tough rules on this, religious people coming from a faraway country, and they had a miserable life. We have to do them support. However, Poland had the iron fist on that in order to protect their local culture and local benefit. Kind of very interesting topic to talk about possibly in the future. Yes. But anyway, so that's the reason I want to point out, the differences between the Muslims immigration and Chinese immigrations were huge. And also one other group that I want to mention in the future is the Hispanics, right? The Latinos. Because the main problem, aside by the Muslim immigration and Chinese immigration nowadays in America, is the Latino immigration. Excuse my language, excuse my word choice for using the word problem. I do apologize. Because among many of these asylum seekers, many of them really, including me, really need the protection from American government. Because if I ever return to China, I can never imagine they sentence me 5 years in jail, but I might die in jail before the 5 years ever end. By so many mysterious ways. You can never imagine that. So anyway, I'm not trying to bring down anybody, right? I'm not trying to bring down any of my country folks like Chinese immigration, Chinese asylum seeker or Muslim asylum seeker. I'm just trying to point out we have so many culture conflict nowadays going on in the world. We have to think about how can we deal with it? Do we have to make a dominant culture in the world like in the past, or can we just really accept each other's differences? But here's the problem. If you accept each other's differences, for example, the Muslim forcing their law, Sharia law, I don't know what, Shalom, right? Is that Shalom law or something like that? They force their law on you. If you open your arm to them to say, oh, we're Christian, but I respect you as Muslim person, right? Islamic people. But will the Islamic people respect you back to say, okay, we're Islamic people, but we respect you as a non-religious people or Muslims or Buddhists? But this is a question. Because we come across some situation that even in Japan, maybe 20 or 30 Muslim guys in the street, they are praying in the street, stop the traffic. Will any policeman come there to handle their business and stop them from praying? If you do that, will they sue you for being violent? Our world is in a big turmoil right now, right? I hope everything goes well. So the purpose of this show is not to instigate any violence, instigate any hatred. I just want you guys, we can embrace each other's differences and try to be more open, try to be more tolerant. However, we still have deadlines to follow. That is, Your freedom can never interfere with anybody else's freedom. If you're forcing anybody else to believe whatever you believe, and that's not freedom at all, right? Think about it, okay? That's for today. See you next time, guys. Bye-bye.